Hello, and welcome back to the Death and Grief Talk podcast. I'm your host, Joelle Simone Maldonado, and I'm also known as the Grave Woman. For many African American and Indigenous families, conversations about death, dying, and other important life matters historically have happened around dinner tables on Sunday evenings or afternoons. These conversations were not only fueled by personal desires, fears, and experiences in life, but in many times were influenced very much so by the foods that were consumed by individual families. In today's episode, I explore the topic of Sunday dinner and Sunday conversations with Dr. Elijah Hall and Ashley Johnson. Ashley Johnson is an alumni of the University of Florida and trained end-of-life doula. She currently serves as the president of the National End-of-Life Doula Alliance. Her death care career was inspired by growing up in a low socioeconomic neighborhood that lacked advocacy on how to deal with end-of-life practices. With more than a decade in death care, ranging from forensic anthropology to whole body donation, she launched Loyal Hands, an end-of-life consulting agency. Dr. Elijah Hall restores African and Indigenous healing legacies. As an impact strategist and systems thinker, Dr. Hall is the founder of the African and Indigenous Knowledge Institute, AIKI, a local consulting organization that develops institutions through interactive educational platforms. In 2020, Dr. Hall received his Ph.D. in policy studies in urban education at the University of Illinois, Chicago. His research centers on how storytelling can heal youth and adults, especially when used as self-edification and character development. With over 20 years of food equity and community organization experience, he fuses political education with public health justice frameworks to provide restoration of African and Indigenous communities. Currently, he is the African American Engagement Director at Compassion and Choices. Ashley, welcome to the Death and Grief Talk podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing. How are you?
I'm doing really good. I'm kind of tired, but tired in the sense that I'm working towards what I believe is impactful. So I'm okay with that.
Ooh, I felt that. Yes. Good tired.
A good tired. Yes.
Yes.
So I know that, your bio and everything is beautifully, it describes like who you are, but I'm interested to know what experience in life made you make the decision that I want to dedicate myself to working in end of life.
Yeah. So whew, there were a lot of moments where I look back now that said, hey, Ashley, like end of life is where you need to be. But I think the most defining moment was when my childhood best friend was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer.
Mm,
And when that happened, and it was stage 4 colon cancer, I should be more specific. So when that happened, it was very caught off guard because people, they get colon cancer at the age of, you get tested at the age of 50 at that time. So she got it when she was 27 and it was stage 4. And so I just saw to help her. And it
mm,
was just doing a friend thing. So it was just like being there for your friend. And throughout my collective years within the death care industry and death life industry, I just had connection. So I knew certain doctors, I knew certain tests. And when it got to the end where my friend was like, I'm good to transition, I'm okay, I'm good with God, I'm good with what's next. That's when I was like, I know funeral directors, so let's
mm.
talk about it. And when that came along, she transitioned. We were able to really go with her plans. And I think that was that pivoting point. So, yes.
It looks like Dr. Elijah Hall has just joined us, and welcome, Dr. Hall.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
She was asking, is he okay? I was like, I know he's busy. I don't know. I hope so.
We'll be good. I hope it's all good.
Yeah.
How are you doing this morning, Dr. Hall?
Oh, doing great. Doing great. Thank you. Apologies for coming on a little late.
Oh, no worries. So I was asking Ashley exactly what moment in life made her decide that she wanted to dedicate her life to helping people navigate the end of theirs. And she shared that her childhood best friend was diagnosed with colon cancer at a very young age, a shockingly young age. And that experience with her just lit something inside of her and inspired her to take every connection that she had and pour it into that experience. And so I'm curious the same with you, Dr. Hall. I know that you do a lot of work, especially around taking care of communities and communities of color at the end of life. And what moment for you was that aha, that light bulb that said, this is what I want to do, and I want to do it in the end of life space?
Absolutely. I appreciate the question. It was a little different for me. I will say that the death of my grandmother in middle school was the first time I lost a relative, someone one, and it was a difficult period for me. And it was, you know, actually, no, in middle school it was my grandfather, let me say. And I was difficult, but then when I got older, I interviewed my grandmother before she transitioned, and it was a profound email. I had gone to college and sociology, and like, oh, oral stories and oral tradition, and so I came back and interviewed my grandmother. I was the first person in the family to interview her about her life ever. She talked about how her grandmother was formerly enslaved, and how we had Choctaw in our family, and our lineage, and all of these things that said things that even her children did not know. And my mother, after she transitioned in 2013, talked about how like that interview was so powerful for her to just hear her voice again. Was really powerful. So I was learning a few things, around the importance and the value of that, but it didn't hit until I actually my dissertation work for my Ph.D. It was on storytelling using West African oral tradition and to heal elders and youth, and I interviewed about 18 storytellers from the organization in Chicago, the Black ASHE, the Chicago Association of Black Storytellers. They were part of this National Association of Black Storytellers. And that's where I was like, wow, there's all these kind of elders out there doing this powerful, profound work. How do I get involved in supporting elders more? And that's when I joined Compassionate Choices.
That's beautiful. And that's so impactful. And listening to your story, it brings up so many memories because I can remember being a little girl in the country with like my great great aunts and great great grandmother, who I did not know was my great great grandmother. At the time, I didn't learn that until maybe 2 years ago. We called her Aunt Catherine or Aunt Vic, and I thought she was my aunt, like my great aunt. But come to find out, she was my father's grandmother. And I found a tape. I moved into this house last year, my maternal grandmother's house, and I found this tape in cleaning, going through things, and it's a recording of an interview that I did of my great grandmother when I was maybe 6 or 7 years old, and I have no idea what's on this tape. However, I'm going to be sending it to Chicago, ironically enough, and having it restored and giving it to my father for Father's Day. And the thing that stands out to me, or the memory that stands out to me the most, is going to Aunt Vic's, my great grandmother's house, and eating okra and shrimp and pork chop sandwiches when I was a little kid. And
her sitting down and just talking to my father. And that brings up the topic of what we're discussing today, is how food and culture and that Sunday dinner atmosphere, what that means for us as Black people, or what it has meant traditionally. And so I would like to frame this conversation and have it like we're sitting around a Sunday dinner table, if that's okay with both of you all.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So my first question is, what are some of the end of life care preferences that are most important to our family? And when I say family, I'm talking about yours, mine, Ashley's, everybody that's listening. And how can we ensure that these preferences are respected if one of us becomes ill? Ashley, I'm going to direct that at you initially, because I imagine that you and your friend probably had some very intense conversations over meals as she was transitioning.
Right. Thank you. Yes. Honestly, I would like to say is just listening, right? It is that awkward conversation. I was fortunate that my friend was accepting and open towards talking about end of life and having her affairs in order. So that made the conversation easy. It's awkward, but still easy to have. And we would sit there and just make sure of, from her favorite color, from her favorite type of music, her favorite, making sure that the favorite foods that she enjoyed, to kind of have them all present at her, from her funeral to yearly events, to have certain things present. And and I am just fortunate for that opportunity, just being with her and just it's just starting with a conversation and just actively listening to respect those choices, because you are her advocate. Like, I was her advocate. So, and I would want somebody else to do that for me. I want somebody, if I'm ever in the situation where I'm not able to talk or communicate right now, somebody to advocate and speak, like, these are my choices. This is what I want to be respected. And for them to be respected.
Right. I tell my husband this all the time. A big thing for me every night is that I sit down and I do what's called a twist out on my hair. I twist my hair down in 2-strand twists. And when I wake up in the morning and I take my shower, I take my twist out and I put on lipstick. And I tell my husband, when we have these conversations, I don't care how sick I am. If I get sick, I don't care if I'm in a hospital bed. I need you to make sure that somebody twists my hair and put some lipstick on me, because I would not be seen any other way. And things like that seem superficial, but I don't think that we give enough attention to what our hair and our appearance mean, not only in life and death, to the Black community. I'm looking at Dr. Hall and I can see that he has a fresh lineup and his beard is freshly trimmed. And I am sure that he would not be seen else, in any other way. And if he were to be in a situation where maybe you couldn't go to the barbershop and get those things done, would that be something that would be important to you, Dr. Hall?
I really appreciate, that piece. Absolutely. And I think to me, it gets back to, how we want to be seen as divinely human, these divine beings that we are. We don't see ourselves as anything other than that, except within the context of this Western white supremacist culture and society that places us in a less than kind of space. But we see ourselves as the divine beings that we are, and that's why we treat ourselves as such, and that's how we want to be treated, whether it is in maternal health, Black maternal health, and not have where our children are being lost at a greater rate than anyone else, or whether it's at the end of life where our choices are not being met and it's inequity there as well. There was just a recent study that just came out that said that Black people, wherever Black doctors live, whatever county a Black doctor lives in, that Black population lives longer. no matter whether or not that doctor actually works in that county or not. But this just shows you how precious and how disregarded Black life is across the board in this country, and how just having folks advocate for you and your and treating and taking your life seriously, and giving you the things that you do prioritize is so important. And I think that lastly, this is so important. We're talking about food and we're talking about Sunday, conversation. It, it is a buffet. I remember, you have all these choices, right? And my mother used to make pot roast. She used to call me Denzel, number one. I mean, that's important. Pinch my cheeks, and she made grandmother made pot roast, right? And so, but there's all these things at dinner, and what we didn't, but still you get to choose what goes on that plate. Mm-hmm. And so, it wasn't like, and I'm a vegan now, so I'm not like, eating the pot roast, but I love stews, and that's really a West African tradition. It comes from that, right? However, we get to choose what goes on our plate. And it's the same kind of thing in terms of what we prefer at the end of life. We get to choose, and that needs to be respected.
I love that. And you mentioned so many important things. And one of those things was divinity. And on my plate, there's a lot of the aesthetic, because as a funeral director, that's what I'm responsible for, is creating the aesthetic around end of life and death, right? And you mentioned divinity. And for me, it's a lot about hair, because our hair is important and it serves so many different purposes and connections throughout our life. But Ashley, I see that you have locks, and
it's not necessarily locks. It's just wild.
I love it, because I love that. And I apologize for misidentifying your hair, but I think that that's important, because that says a lot about your personality, and it looks amazing on you. And to me, that says that you're free-hearted, you're free-spirited, you're open, you're just kind of go with the flow and able to move throughout life. And I think that if we had more education around those things, then when we're in end of life medical situations, funeral homes, when doulas are working with us at the end of our lives, paying attention to little things like that could change so much. And I'm curious about your experience with that as a death doula.
Yeah, you know what? I love that you pinned this question, because hair is very important. And being an end of life doula, I walk into situations where I get to know families. And that's one of the keen aspects that I like to hone into and listen for, is what actually is really important for that individual. Yes, I can also agree that in the African American, especially culture, it is hair. And going back to my friend, I also agree. Every day we brushed her hair. She was in the hospital from diagnosis. She got out of the hospital for maybe a few weeks before she went back in and transitioned. But we did her hair every day, as like if we were going out and about. We brushed it, styled it, and it was very important for her. That was a part of her personality. And when I'm in families' homes, I really do look for the same thing. Sitting here with this conversation, I noticed that, yes, I do a lot of the things that I did with my friend, and her name was Dominique. I did a lot of things, from paying attention to active listening, to asking those in-depth questions, because I really want to get to know them. So make sure that I honor their choices, their values, their morals, and actually engaging their family. So I can also get to know more and get in depth about what is really important, because it could be not necessarily hair, but it could be their religion, or it could be nails, making sure that my nails are painted. There's nothing chipped, because that is a characteristic of me, because they could talk with their hands, and that's their sense of normalcy. So being an end of life doula, I actually love it, because I get to learn and immerse myself in different families, in different cultures. And it's just, honestly, it's beautiful to see what is important, what is someone deems important.
That's beautiful. And thinking about food, and, we all love to think about the amazing foods we love to eat, no matter what, like a lot, Dr. Hall said, it's a buffet. So there's plenty, and it's going to be different for everyone. Everyone's plate's going to look different at the end of the day. But I'm a person that has a severe allergy to cashews, right? And I don't care if it's in something or if it's been near something. Something about my body is extremely sensitive to cashews, and I go into anaphylactic shock. And that makes me think about a question that you submitted, Ashley, about how is it that we can make sure that all family members are aware of our advanced care plans and are prepared to act on our behalf if needed? And that makes me think, well, about food, like, well, what if I can't communicate that I have this allergy? Somebody needs to be able to do it for me, because I could be fed something that could kill me that's not even related to a terminal diagnosis or sickness or whatever. So how do we ensure that our allergies are addressed in this diet of end of life, and that someone's able to speak up and make sure that, we have what we need, or that we don't get what we don't need or want? Dr. Hall?
Oh, I was like, ooh, waiting. I was waiting. Okay. This is such a phenomenal question, because, the way that we treat food allergies and allergens, and the way that there's a regulation, and the way that people are in the food industry are trained around this issue is the answer, and is to the question itself. The reality is that you have to be extremely clear. You have to have signage. You have to train the waitress, to have the question. You have to then make sure that it goes back into the chef. They have to prepare it in a different dish, in a different etc. Then they have to bring it on a separate plate. Then they have to say that this is the right thing. And then they bring it to the customer saying, this is what you asked us for. Did we get it right? If we took that same kind of approach, had the same kind of legislation, policy in the healthcare facilities, we would have amazing results, because there would be an accountability system and a checks and balance, if you will, that says, did this facility, did these nurses, did this doctor follow X, Y, and Z? And I think that's where we we need of something of that nature. And I'll finish it by saying it, because it's the same kind of hypocrisy as when a person gets incarcerated, specifically, they can go and work for companies while they're incarcerated for pennies on the dollar, all right, a day, companies like Victoria's Secret, for example. But then when that same individual leaves the prison, they have now become justice involved, quote unquote, formerly incarcerated, and they cannot work for that same company because they don't hire, guess what, formerly incarcerated individuals. It's that kind of hypocrisy that we need to be calling out within this same end of life. And we need to be doing it both and creating precedents for both the healthcare system and our families, as you mentioned.
Beautifully articulated. Ashley, I'm curious about, in the doula space, how do you ensure that the end of life diet doesn't consist of allergens for each individual client that you take on, so to speak?
Yeah, I think I was going to go co-sign, because I love the analogies that were put. But in this space, it is dealing with just individuals one-on-one. It is just honing in and just having those type of transparent guides. Like you said, It's so easy for us to go to a restaurant and say, hey, I have a food allergy, take this off, cook this separately. If we could use that same analogy when talking about end of life, I want this type of music. I have this type of, I'm allergic to penicillin, and really apply that. It would be beautiful, because you don't know what you don't know. I can say I didn't know my mom was allergic to sulfa until I went to her doctor's appointment, right? And it was kind of eye-opening because I'm my mother's caregiver, and I said, wow, it's just those conversations where I then went back and I wrote that down, because in the case that she's not able to speak, I wanted to be able to have that in my back pocket, her allergies. And if we have these types of transparent conversations, it helps when it does come to that end of life planning.
I love that. And you're so right. We don't know what we don't know. I have a very wise friend named Miss Tracy Cease, and we worked at a cemetery together when I was fresh out of college. And she pulled me to the side one day because I was like feeling myself. I had just graduated from college, and, I don't want to say it, but I thought I knew it all. And what she did was so beautiful. And it just, she poured so much wisdom into me by doing this. She took a piece of paper, she drew a dot on it. She said, "This is what you know." She drew a circle around this dot and said, "This is what you don't know." She drew a circle around that dot and said, "This is what you don't know that you don't know that you need to know, but you don't know that you don't know." And she kept drawing circles around the dot until she ran out of paper. And it just, it shook me inside because I thought I knew, but I really had no idea. And that is something I revisit and implement into my life in so many different ways. And I love that you said that we don't know what we don't know. But in closing, I want to play a little game with you guys, if that's okay. And the game is called Cherry on Top, to match our conversation and kind of close with a sweet dessert. And so I want to ask each of you, and I'll share last, what would be the cherry on top of your dessert of end of life for you? What is the one thing that matters the most? The one thing that you, if it happens in your care, in your communications with your family, like what would be the cherry on top for you? And I'm going to start with you, Ashley, because I can see your brain spinning, and I'll then move.
My brain is spinning. I am all about culture. I'm all about food. I'm a foodie, right? It is actually bad because I'm a vegetarian. So I love pushing the envelope and my palate. But I was thinking, because I said, obvious, my cherry on top would be something related to food. I want to make sure, and this is something that is already in my advanced directives, that we have great food. And I say like great food, like we have food from, it's like Southern food from New Orleans, that has that, just the seasoning, and it, because food brings us together. And at my end of life, my death is what I want to bring the people in my life together, and to have that great conversation, to have these open conversations, and hopefully inspire people to say like, hey, Ashley planned this ahead of time, and look at us, like we are not mourning, we are celebrating her life. And in the celebration, it provokes that conversation for them to actually get their plans in order, to kind of, so to speak, have a celebration of their own. They think about what they would like for their celebration of their own, because honestly, it makes it less grim. You get more empowered when you take control of your life and your end of life, your death. You feel more empowered. So my cherry on top is just to make sure that we have amazing tasting, seasoned food.
That's beautiful. Dr. Hall, what about you?
Yeah, that last part better have some flavor, okay? Or else. So what? My goodness.
Right.
Yeah, just to keep in that vein, I'll say two things. One, on the food piece, absolutely, for me, it's West African food. And I make West African food. I was saying stews, soups, peanut soup, stew. I make a ital soup or stew, which is like a vegan alkaline soup stew, coming out of Dr. Sebi, and like Rastafarian culture, and so that, yes, but it's not just the West African. It's not just the agusi, which is like this pumpkin stewy dish and seed. I mean, but it's also East African and injera and the stews, and so just African food in general. My children love it. They've been to Africa, to Ghana. They joke with me like, your jollof rice is not the real jollof rice. It hurts, but but I'm learning. But the food I've always cooked. I cooked it there. And making smoothies at my son's birth, and actually was in the tub to receive him. So that was, and taking care of the doula that was at our home, so that's that kind of hospitality, being that hospitable, caretaker of the folks in my house is something I'm always doing. And I think, for that piece, I think is excellent. And then I would lastly say, because I make music, and I'm always making music. I have another album coming out in a month or so. I think about Jay Dilla, and I don't know if you all know Jay Dilla, but he is a profound producer, hip hop producer. He was literally the first one to really start sampling, 80s, 90s, and became really phenomenal. And I was in Cali, and Common was making music with him, and all of it, he was just phenomenal. But and this was like when he was 20, but he got in his 30s and got a disease and transitioned really quickly. Got and one of the things that he asked for was for them to bring his music production equipment into the hospital room, and he made his last album from the hospital bed. And it is some of the most phenomenal music. It's it's all instrumentals, because that's what I do. I make instrumentals. So I attribute, my music is like an already kind of like a tribute to him. But that to me is like how I want to go out. Like, let me be making music. If I can, I want to be making music until I can.
That is beautiful. And when you said his name, it didn't click until you said Common. But I actually went to a Common concert a couple years ago, and he actually had his equipment on stage. And the beginning of his set was a tribute to Jay Dilla, and it was beautiful. He actually played some of that music, and I remember being blown away. So thank you for making that connection. And it actually plays in perfectly to what my cherry on top is, which is to die empty. That would be the cherry on top. Like, I don't want to have anything left, any more work for my spirit to do on this side. When I'm done, I don't want to have to come back and start over or any of those things. I want all the ideas, all of the creative energy, because I'm a creative. Like, I want, and not like in the sense of like I paint or I sing or anything like that, but like I can see something in my mind and literally manifest it into this realm with zero effort. And I want to die empty of all that is in here. Mm-hmm. So thank you both so much for spending time with me today, this morning. This has been so, I feel it like in my heart. I'm almost getting emotional from what we shared. And I just want to thank you for sharing. You have been a part of helping me empty out a part of this. So thank you. And before we leave, both Ashley and Elijah, ladies first, please let everyone know where they can find you.
Yeah, thanks. This was actually a great conversation, and I hope it inspires others to have these types of conversations, bringing it to the table. But you can find me with the National End of Life Doula Alliance, their Instagram. My personal Instagram is loyal.hands, and and on TikTok. It's Loyal Hands.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. And yes, this was phenomenal. Again, it's great to be on this with you all, just learning and absorbing so much from the work that you all do, just giving you all your flowers. And you can find me at Compassionate Choices on LinkedIn, and also and the website, and also you can find me on my Instagram at Elisha Jeremiah.
Thank you all so much. Links and bios will be in the description for this video on YouTube and in the description on the podcast on Spotify, Apple, and wherever else you're listening. Live life, love hard. We'll talk to you next time.